things you didn't want to see.
It spoke to me.
What did it say, Isaac? What did it say to you, Isaac? Isaac, can you hear me?
I think that it would be foolish to say that the Dead Space series is tame in comparison to many of its competitors, especially at the time of its inception. The devs at Visceral Games were treading new ground and creating new cuts into the industry that had many people questioning if it was too far. I mean, they literally had promotional material called Your Mom Hates Dead Space. Now, I love the horror genre, and I gotta say that some of the imagery in the first Dead Space was truly shocking. Of course, today people wouldn't even bat an eyelash at this stuff because of just how desensitized everybody is, but I mean, back in 2008, when this game came out, you would be hard-pressed to find anything as brutal as Dead Space. Plus, who can forget that classic suit-up scene? At the time, it was a totally new take on horror in the gaming sphere. It's evident that the inspiration was taken from classic horror films like The Thing especially, but also Alien as well. With the improvements to tech, the sadistic people at Visceral Games wanted to create an experience that would mirror their studio name. That and have you checking under your bed at night, no matter how freaking old you were. They stomped their way into the industry, not just by shock value, though let's be honest, that certainly helped them, but by creating a fantastic game. The first Dead Space was a fluid shooter with superb world building, immersion techniques, graphics, and story. To top that off, their impressive innovations on the gameplay front changed third-person horror forever. Using your suit, the player was actually able to use objects in the environment against their enemies, even these mutated abominations' own limbs and appendages. That's right. It was also the first game to use immersion techniques like having all of the player's information on the actual character model, allowing for a clean screen so there was no cluttered HUD elements. This wasn't just for the visual appeal, but it also made the world way more grounded, though I gotta say, it looked pretty damn awesome. They created a recipe for success that opened them up for 2 more games, and there honestly probably would have been a 4th Dead Space if they didn't stray so far away with Dead Space 3, though I honestly don't think Dead Space 3 is all that bad. Regardless of Dead Space 3's failure among the masses, the first 2 games stand tall as classics among horror fans all around the world. You probably already knew this, but what you didn't know is that Dead Space 2 is without a doubt the best one, and you can take that to the bank. First, for anyone that doesn't know anything about this grotesque franchise, let me just give you a rundown. So here's the scoop. Dead Space follows engineer Isaac Clarke as he tries to uncover and stop a parasitic alien outbreak that is spread when organic life of any kind is within range of these alien artifacts, simply given the name markers. If organic life remains within range of these markers for long enough, they will slowly go insane and turn into necromorphs. Now, this wouldn't be a problem, if humans knew well enough to leave them alone. However, they're a limitless source of energy, so of course humans are trying to harness it. And also, to add on to that, the Church of Unitology, like a cult pretty much, believes that these markers are a divine source of power and replicate these artifacts as well. Now, what they don't know is these markers are actually using electromagnetic signals to brainwash them in order to accomplish their end goal known as the convergence event. I won't spoil this, but it's very, very bad. Dead Space 2 launched 3 years after the wave the first one made, and it pretty much took everything the first one did and made it better, whilst adding a sufficient amount of new content to help it stand out. Though they improved the movement, shooting, zero gravity, traversal, and graphics, perhaps the most notable change here was to Isaac himself. Unlike the first game, this time around he was fully voice acted, and I can't tell you how much this added to the game.
Doing this. Why can't everyone just leave me alone, huh?
You're a dangerous secret, Isaac. EarthGov won't leave you alone because they're afraid you'll destroy their marker. After all, you did build it.
What are you talking about?
I mean, he got a wicked education in between 1 and 2, I just gotta say. Dead Space 2 picks up 3 years after the original with a recovering Isaac after destroying the marker in the first game. It's safe to say that our lead has spent a little too much time around it because he's got marker-induced dementia. Much like Isaac, we have no idea where we are. We're greeted with an interrogation while being bundled in a straitjacket. A rapid, grotesque escape leads us to the knowledge that we're aboard a space station with the illustrious name the Sprawl, a colony built on Saturn's largest moon, Titan. This colony just happens to be home to thousands of people and families, raising the stakes significantly from the mining ship in the first title. Not only that, but you get the sense that this is a real threat that has potential to end everything. The presentation really helps drive this threat home. As we make our way into the colony, we actually see ships departing, families crying, and explosions rocking the infrastructure as another necromorph outbreak begins. There's a lot to love with how this rustic industrial world is portrayed. The first couple of hours will tour you through areas that the populace commonly gathered, like cinemas, shopping centers, apartment complexes, and even churches. Eventually though, the dirty underbelly rears its head, and it's here that the setting really shines. Large trash compactors, morgues, gravitational wells, and even cargo hubs are all on the itinerary. You'll even make your way into the cold void of space occasionally. The bleak mechanical setting does wonders for the horror aspects of the game, but it also drives home the sense of tangible investment to keep a colony of this size functioning. All the intricacies of how a world like this could operate are extremely fascinating. It also helps then that the vast majority of lethal weapons you'll have at your disposal are excavation tools. This kind of world building is something that a lot of horror games seem to skip on, unfortunately. This already makes the game better than the first one due to the sheer fact that while Dead Space 1 was claustrophobic and creepy, the variety just wasn't there. Many of the ship's interiors look the same, offering a somewhat repetitive roller coaster. 2 presents vastly varied environments that even serve as introductions to new mutations that fit the setting. For example, we make our way into a daycare, right? And you think, oh, this can't be that bad. Wrong. You're freaking wrong. We're introduced to exploding babies. Yes, exploding babies. In fact, while we're on the topic of variety, it's not just in its setting, but its enemy variety. Bosses, guns, and mini-games to help break up the copious amounts of stress your body will endure. With that, they improved zero-G movements, allowing for 360-degree control. They improved the interactivity in the environment using telekinesis, and made the gunplay tighter with the addition of new weapons to absolutely tear your opponents limb from limb. These gameplay tweaks, especially regarding the tighter controls, were necessary to its reception, as 2 shifted its gameplay focus to a horror action approach, whereas the first title was a really slow, claustrophobic horror corridor shooter. Now this is where fans were kind of divided, as some fancied the straight-up horror route more, but it can't be denied that it did both pretty damn well.
My mother! We have to go, man!
Though 2 offers more bombastic set pieces, wider play spaces, and more opportunities to mow these abominations down, it never strays far away from its horror roots. And I'd be lying if I said this game didn't scare the shit out of me. This is also thanks to the fact that, for the better part of the game, you'll be on your own. Isaac has plenty of interactions with the supporting cast, but almost all of it is via comlinks. You'll meet up with these characters for story beats, but they never really stick around by your side and help you fight. As previously stated, the decision to have Isaac talk actually helped tremendously with the story, because these interactions would have been super awkward if Isaac didn't respond. The story centers around 3 characters as they try to destroy another marker that was built on Titan. To accomplish this, Isaac will need to work with the badass but solitary Ellie Langford and Nolan Strauss, an unpredictable inmate of the medical asylum that feels a connection to Isaac through his decaying mental state, also induced by the marker imprint.
Step boy, she'll be waiting.
Jesus, Strauss. You okay?
It's getting worse.
What is step 4? Who will be waiting?
While the writing isn't anything amazing, it does a great job of fleshing out the setting and keeping the story moving. Isaac actually has a somewhat compelling arc in overcoming his mental state and his ever-growing bond with Ellie as the game progresses. He starts as a man that has nothing left to live for and finds purpose in his mission. He's willing to give his life, walk headfirst into unspeakable horror, all to save humanity. Alright, let's get back to unspeakable horrors, because yes, this game came up with all kinds of new enemies that should never have been made. I mean, look at this. Visceral Games introduced more than 5 new enemy types for the player to contend with. Why, Visceral? Why? Some of these things I can't even with. The Stalkers do exactly what their name implies. They stalk the player from the shadows, looking for that perfect angle to strike when you're not looking. Seriously, fuck these guys. I had a hard time getting through these sections even to this day. Thankfully, to combat these things, players can upgrade individual weapons, their health rig, telekinesis, and stasis using power nodes. These nifty items can be found by exploring the world, You won't obtain enough to fully upgrade multiple guns in one run, but thankfully there is a new game plus. An abundance of credits can also be found to buy new suits, weapons, ammo, and health. Any unused items and ammo can be sold at these self-serving shops. I spent a lot of time talking about the positives, but by no means is this game perfect, and it does have its issues. Though they did implement a hacking minigame to break up the gameplay, it does get quite repetitive quite quickly. Use the cone to find the line within the time limit. It's not difficult and it never changes. I don't think I ever failed one of these. The objectives can get quite tedious at times too, much like the first game. Go here, move this, flip this switch, go back. Isaac is an engineer, so you'll be doing tasks to fix things a lot. There are quite a few cinematic moments in which the player must shoot a target in the required time limit or they'll die. Much like a QuickTime event, I appreciate what they were going for, but eventually it loses its appeal, especially because there are times when you'll have to replay these sections a few times if you aren't getting the timing just right. Aside from those complaints though, the only other real complaint I've seen with other people is that the gameplay is relatively unchanged from the first one, and while I agree, aren't most sequels like that? At the end of the day, these issues are minor in nature and it really didn't detract from the overall experience. In fact, Dead Space 2 feels like a modern game. Hell, the graphics even hold up. I think that goes to show just how ahead of their time Visceral Games was and how impressive their footprint on the industry is. Dead Space 2 isn't just the best game in the Dead Space series, but is also one of the best horror games to ever grace the earth. That's why I'm incredibly excited for the upcoming Callisto Protocol. It's not Visceral Games making it per se, but there are many devs on board that had worked with Visceral and EA closely. If the Callisto Protocol game is going to be anything like Dead Space 2, then I think we're in for a massive treat, because there seems to be a lot of talented people behind this, and I am just absolutely stoked to get my hands on this game. And it comes out in December. It comes out December 2nd, actually. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about my opinions. What are your opinions, and how would you rank these games? I try not to be too picky, as I love gaming, and I'm just lucky to be a part of this community, but here we are. Alright, thank you all for watching.
I'm afraid, Isaac. I don't want to die. But it's the only way out.
You're not, Nicole. Nicole's dead.